Hey, it's Mary. And you probably wouldn't believe me if I told you everything that happened. I didn't either at first. It all started like a fairy tale, or at least, that's what I thought. Jake? He was everything. Charming, funny, sweet, he made me feel like I was the only girl in the world. But here's the thing. When everything's perfect, it doesn't last long. And I didn't see the cracks. I didn't see them until it was too late. At first, I was so into him, you know? Like, everything about him just felt right. The way he made me laugh, the way he would hold my hand in public, like he was proud to be with me. I thought, this is it. This is what love is supposed to feel like. But then, one day, I did something that wasn't even a big deal, just a small thing, but it set him off. I had made plans with my friends, and when I told him, he didn't react the way I expected. He went quiet. And then, he looked at me, dead in the eyes, and said, I thought we were gonna spend time together tonight. And I froze. It was like he didn't even care about my plans. It was all about him. It hit me, but I didn't say anything. I just let it slide. I kept telling myself it was no big deal. Maybe I was overthinking it. But then, little by little, the demands started piling up. I couldn't go anywhere without him. Couldn't talk to my friends without feeling guilty. And slowly, I noticed how it wasn't just about spending time together anymore. He didn't want me going out without him, didn't want me talking to anyone else. One day, I mentioned hanging out with a friend, and he looked at me, sharp and cold, and said, if you really cared about me, you wouldn't need anyone else. Did you hear that? If you really cared about me, at that moment, I should have left, right? But I didn't. I didn't because I was in too deep, too far in love to see it for what it was, manipulation. He was using my love for him against me, and I was so blinded by it, I couldn't see it. Then came the guilt trips. Every time I went to class or hung out with my friends, he'd act like I was abandoning him. He'd tell me how lonely he felt when I wasn't around. How he needed me more than anything. And I kept trying to reassure him, I'm here. I'll always be here. But the truth? The truth was, I wasn't there for me anymore. I was losing myself, bit by bit. And you know what hurt the most? The fact that he could make me feel bad about wanting a life outside of him. He'd guilt-trip me for studying too much, for laughing too loud with my friends. And I'd start second-guessing myself. Is it wrong to want a little space? Was I being selfish? Was he right to want me all to himself? These questions twisted my mind, and I couldn't get a clear answer anymore. And then came the argument. The one I'll never forget. We were sitting in his car, and I had mentioned a project at school. I was excited about it, but the moment I said it, he turned to me, his face darkening, and said, you know what? It's all about school with you, isn't it? Maybe if you spent more time with me, you wouldn't be so stressed. His voice was sharp, cutting through the air. And I remember sitting there, holding back tears, thinking, why does he make me feel like this? Things escalated from there. A week later, he brought it up. School. He said, you know, you don't need school. You have me. And at that moment, something inside me snapped. He was asking me to choose. Not between him and anyone else, but between him and my dreams. And I remember staring at him, feeling my heart race, thinking, is this real? But I didn't say anything. I just nodded, thinking that maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe school was holding me back from something better. From him. Then it hit me like a freight train. I was sitting in class the next day, and all I could think about was him. His words. You don't need school. You just need me. The more I thought about it, the more I doubted everything. The life I had before him seemed so distant. My goals, my friends, my family, it was like I had a choice to make. And every time I closed my eyes, I heard him. I heard him saying, you have me now. Isn't that enough? The pressure kept building. And one night, I sat in my room, staring at my laptop. I had everything ready. The forms, the excuse to drop out. I was going to do it. I was going to quit. I thought, maybe it's time to choose him. Maybe he's right. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the fear and the excitement mixing together. But something deep inside me, something I couldn't shake, told me to stop. But I didn't listen. I filled out the papers. I hit send. The next day, I told him. I remember his face lighting up, like he had won something. Like he had gotten exactly what he wanted. He was so proud of me. But I wasn't. Deep down, I wasn't proud of myself. I felt like I was betraying everything I'd worked for. But there was no going back now. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt free, like I had finally made a choice. But I didn't. Every day, it gnawed at me. The guilt. The self-doubt. It was like I had lost a part of myself, and I didn't know how to get it back. And Jake? He didn't see it. Or maybe he just didn't care. He'd come to me every day, telling me how proud he was of me. But I wasn't proud. I felt small. I felt like I was giving up on everything I ever wanted just to make him happy. And I was questioning myself every second of it. What was wrong with me? Why couldn't I just be happy with my choice? Was it really the right one? And then, it happened. The first real sign that something was deeply wrong. I was sitting on the couch, minding my own business, when Jake walked in, his face flushed with anger. He'd seen a message from one of my old friends on my phone. And before I could explain, he went off. Why are they even talking to you? What, you think they're better than me? The words stung, and they cut deep. I tried to calm him down, but it wasn't working. The look in his eyes? It was different. It was no longer love. It was something darker. Something possessive. I felt like I was suffocating, like I was losing control. I needed space. I needed to breathe. So, I did what anyone would do, I left. I went to my friend's house for a few hours, trying to clear my head. But it didn't help. Not really. The whole time, my phone was buzzing with texts from him. He was angry. He was upset. And I kept telling myself that it was fine. It was normal. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. That night, when I came back, I was a shell of myself. Jake didn't let it go. He kept bringing it up. Over and over. Why did you leave me? You think you can just walk away? And the worst part? I didn't have an answer. I didn't know how to explain why I needed space, why I needed to breathe. I felt trapped. Days turned into weeks, and things just kept getting worse. He stopped letting me make decisions for myself. Every time I tried to, he'd shoot it down. If I made plans without him, he'd guilt-trip me. If I laughed too loud with my friends, he'd make me feel like I was betraying him. And it wasn't just emotional anymore. It was controlling. Everything I did seemed to revolve around him. It was like I had no space for myself anymore. I couldn't think for myself. I couldn't even laugh without worrying if it would upset him. And the worst part? I started to question my own choices. I started to think maybe I was the one in the wrong. Maybe I was selfish for wanting to live my life. And then came the breaking point. The day I will never forget. He told me that I had to choose between him and school again. It's either me or school, Mary, he said, his voice cold and demanding. Pick one. And in that moment, everything came crashing down. I couldn't breathe. It was like I was trapped in a nightmare, and there was no way out. How could he ask me to choose? How could he put me in that position? But the worst part was that I almost said yes. I almost agreed. But just before the words left my mouth, something inside me snapped. Something inside me told me I had to fight for myself. And that's when I finally realized, this wasn't love. This was control. That was the moment. The moment I realized I had lost myself. But here's the thing, there's a power in realizing that. I wasn't broken yet. Not completely. And even though it felt like I was drowning, like I couldn't escape, deep down, I knew I had one choice left. I had to fight back. I couldn't keep living for him. I had to start living for me again. And that scared me more than anything. Because once you start realizing what's really happening, you can't unsee it. I couldn't unsee the truth anymore. And the truth was, Jake wasn't the person I thought he was. He wasn't the guy who loved me unconditionally. He was the guy who was suffocating me. But here's where it gets complicated. Because even though I knew what was happening, even though I could see the manipulation and the control, I was still scared to leave him. Why? Because when you're in that kind of relationship, it messes with your mind. You start to believe you can't live without that person. That they're the only thing keeping you from falling apart. I was terrified of being alone. Terrified that if I left him, I'd be nothing. And that's how they get you. They make you feel like you're nothing without them. Like you can't survive without their approval, their love. But the truth? The truth is, I was never nothing. I was never less than. I just had to remember who I was. You know, it's crazy how you can feel so lost in someone else's world. But that one final straw, the one that makes you finally see everything. For what it is, it hits you when you least expect it. For me, it came one night when Jake said something so hurtful, so cutting, that I couldn't ignore it anymore. We were sitting in his car, and he looked at me, this cold look in his eyes, and said, "You'll never make it without me. No one will ever love you like I do." Those words. They tore through me. Because for a second, I almost believed him. I almost believed that no one else would ever love me. But then, something inside me snapped. I realized how twisted that thought was. How much control he had over my mind. I left that night. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there anymore. I went for a walk, the night air cool against my skin, trying to clear my head. But all I could hear was his voice. In my head. "You'll never make it without me." It kept repeating. But you know what? That voice? It wasn't him. It was the voice inside me telling me I had to fight back. I had to find the strength to say no. I don't know how long I walked, but when I came back, I was different. I was no longer the person who would let him control my life. I was no longer the girl who thought I needed him to survive. I had my answer. And it wasn't a pretty one. But it was the truth. The next day, I confronted him. It wasn't easy. I didn't know if he'd get angry or if he'd try to talk me out of it again. But I had to do it. I had to stand up for myself, once and for all. I looked him in the eyes and said, "Jake, this isn't working. You're not the person I thought you were. And I'm done." His face? I'll never forget it. He looked at me, almost shocked, like he couldn't believe I was saying it. He started yelling, telling me I was throwing everything away, that I was being selfish. But I didn't back down. This time, I wasn't scared. This time, I was finally free. Walking away wasn't easy, though. Not at first. It's like you've been in a cage for so long, and even when the door is wide open, you don't know how to step out. I spent days second-guessing myself, wondering if I had made the right choice. But then, slowly, things started to fall into place. I began to focus on my goals again. I started studying again. And slowly, the weight lifted. But let me tell you something, even though I was free from him, there was a part of me that still felt lost. I had to find myself again. And it wasn't going to happen overnight. Now, here's the thing nobody tells you about leaving a toxic relationship. It's not all rainbows and butterflies after you walk away. There's a period of loneliness. A period where you question if you made the right choice. I missed him. I missed the good moments. The fun moments. And it hurt, you know? Because even though I knew what he did was wrong, I still cared about him. I still loved him. And that's the hardest part. Letting go of someone you love, even when you know they're toxic. Because love doesn't just disappear. It lingers. It makes you doubt yourself, makes you wonder if you made the biggest mistake of your life. But here's the truth, rebuilding doesn't happen in one day. It takes time. And you'll have days when you feel like you're not strong enough. But trust me when I say this, you are. You don't need anyone to make you feel whole. You were whole before them, and you'll be whole after them. I started doing things I loved again. I found hobbies, I spent more time with my family. I focused on my dreams. It wasn't always easy, and there were times I doubted myself, but I kept pushing forward. Then, one day, something clicked. I realized I was okay on my own. I didn't need anyone to validate me. I didn't need Jake to tell me I was worthy. I was worthy on my own. I was strong on my own. And you know what? That was the most liberating feeling I'd ever had. For the first time in forever, I felt like I could breathe. Like I had control over my life again. And it was beautiful. Here's the crazy thing I realized, the whole time, I had been giving up pieces of myself for him. But the moment I took those pieces back, I felt more complete than I'd ever felt before. I started to love myself again. I started to believe in myself again. And that's what I want you to understand. You don't have to be anyone's second choice. You don't have to lose yourself in someone else's world. You are enough, just as you are. I'm not going to lie to you. Even though I knew I made the right decision, there were still moments that brought me back to the past. The memories of Jake, the good ones, they still haunted me. I would wake up at night, and for a second, I'd almost believe that everything was fine, that we could be happy again. But then, I'd snap back to reality. Reality hit hard. And the reality was, I couldn't go back. I couldn't let myself fall into that trap again. As much as I missed the comfort of having someone there, I had to face the truth. It was never really love. It was control, and I wasn't going to let him have any more of me. After I walked away, something incredible happened. My old friends, the ones I neglected while I was with him, started reaching out. At first, I was hesitant. I didn't know if they'd judge me for the choices I'd made. But instead, they welcomed me back with open arms. And let me tell you, that felt like a breath of fresh air. It reminded me of who I used to be before everything got tangled up with Jake. One of them, Sarah, told me something I'll never forget. She said, "We were never mad at you, Mary. We just missed you. We just want you to be happy, the way you deserve." And in that moment, I realized something. I had so much more to live for than I had given myself credit for. But with all the love and support from my friends, there was still something heavy weighing on me, regret. I regretted wasting so much time on someone who didn't deserve it. I regretted not seeing the red flags earlier. And yeah, I even regretted the fact that I allowed myself to be manipulated in the first place. It wasn't just about Jake anymore. It was about me. It was about how I let myself lose my identity, how I let myself become someone I didn't recognize. And I had to come to terms with that. I had to forgive myself. And that wasn't easy. It felt like I had betrayed myself in the worst way. You might think that walking away from a toxic relationship means you're done with it. But that's not how it works. The scars? They stay. They don't vanish overnight. And forgiving yourself? That's harder than anything. You keep telling yourself, how could I have been so blind? How could I have let it go on for so long? But here's the thing, you can't change the past. All you can do is learn from it. And that's exactly what I was doing. I started realizing something, the more I held on to the past, the less room I had to grow. I was still tethered to a version of me that didn't exist anymore. I had to let it go. Let go of the guilt. Let go of the what ifs. Let go of the fear that I had made a mistake. Because no matter what happened, I was still here. I was still standing. Letting go doesn't mean you forget. It means you stop letting it control your life. And that was the hardest part. But also the most freeing part. Because once I let go, I found space to rebuild. I found space to become who I was supposed to be. And here's the thing that took me the longest to understand, it wasn't the relationship that made me strong. It wasn't Jake. It was me. It was the fact that, even after everything, I had the courage to walk away. I had the strength to pick up the pieces and move forward. And that's what I want you to understand. You're stronger than you think. You're not defined by who walks into your life or who walks out of it. You are defined by your ability to stand tall, to move on, and to never stop fighting for yourself. As time went on, I started to notice changes in myself. I started enjoying the little things again, like the quiet mornings, the laughter with my friends, the simple moments that felt real. And something else changed too. I became more confident. More sure of myself. I wasn't afraid to take up space. I wasn't afraid to take care of myself. I think the biggest thing I learned through all of this is that growth doesn't come from staying in your comfort zone. It doesn't come from staying in a toxic relationship or letting someone else dictate who you are. It comes from stepping outside of that comfort zone and taking control of your life again. You know, when you're in a toxic relationship, you don't always see the changes happening to you. But when you step away, you start noticing them. The person I saw in the mirror was someone I didn't recognize. I didn't see the confident, carefree girl I used to be. Instead, I saw someone who had been broken down. Someone who had been conditioned to doubt her worth. But here's the thing, when you realize that, when you face that version of yourself, you have a choice. You can either stay stuck in that broken version, or you can rebuild. I chose to rebuild. And it wasn't pretty. It wasn't easy. But it was the best thing I've ever done for myself. As much as I wanted to move forward, there was always this fear lingering in the back of my mind. The fear that maybe I couldn't do it. Maybe I wasn't strong enough to rebuild. The fear that I'd never find someone who truly cared about me, who wouldn't try to control me or make me feel small. It felt easier to stay in that place of fear, because at least then, I didn't have to face the possibility of being alone forever. But the thing about fear is that it paralyzes you. It stops you from growing, from learning, from becoming who you were meant to be. Over time, I started doing things for myself again. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned. I spent more time with my family and friends, reconnecting with the people who truly cared about me. And slowly, I started to remember who I was before Jake. Before all the manipulation and the lies. I was more than someone's partner. I was Mary. And Mary had dreams. Mary had a life. It didn't happen overnight, but with every little step I took, I got closer to the person I used to be. And even better, closer to the person I was becoming. It wasn't long before I realized something else. I didn't have to say yes to everything. I didn't have to please everyone. And I didn't have to keep apologizing for taking care of myself. The first time I said no to someone, it felt like a victory. The first time I stood my ground and didn't feel guilty about it, that felt like freedom. It's crazy how something as simple as setting boundaries can change your life. But it does. It gives you control over your own narrative. It helps. You reclaim the parts of yourself that you've lost. And that's exactly what I was doing, reclaiming myself, one no at a time. And then, just when I thought I was starting to get my life back together, Jake reached out. I didn't know if I should answer. Part of me wanted to hear what he had to say, to hear him beg for forgiveness. But another part of me? That part knew better. That part knew I couldn't go back. I had come so far, and I wasn't about to let him take that away from me. When I picked up the phone, I didn't know what to expect. But when I heard his voice, something inside me clicked. I knew this was it. This was the final test. And I wasn't going to fail it. He asked if we could meet. He told me he missed me. That he was sorry for everything. And you know what? For the first time, I didn't feel anything. No sadness. No longing. No anger. Just nothing. It was like I was seeing him for who he really was, not who I had imagined him to be. The man who once held my heart was nothing more than someone who had used me. Someone who had tried to take everything from me, and still thought he could come back into my life. I told him I couldn't meet him. I told him I had moved on. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about it. He tried to convince me, tried to make me feel like I was making a mistake. But I just said, I'm sorry, but I'm not that person anymore. And I hung up the phone. I never looked back. As time went on, I started to realize that walking away from him wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was forgiving myself for ever thinking I wasn't enough. Forever believing that someone else had the power to define who I was. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm stronger. I'm wiser. And I know now that the only person who gets to define me is me. The real work began after I walked away from Jake. It wasn't just about getting out of a toxic relationship. It was about learning how to be independent again. How to trust myself again. I had spent so long questioning my decisions, second-guessing everything I did. But now, I was finally taking ownership of my life. Here's the thing that people don't always tell you about independence: it doesn't happen overnight. It's not some magical transformation. It's slow. It's messy. And sometimes, it's painful. But with every day that passed, I started to feel more like myself again. The weight I had been carrying for so long began to lift, little by little. Now, no one talks about the loneliness that comes after a breakup like this. You think you're going to feel free, like the world's your oyster. But in reality, it's quiet. Too quiet. You start to miss the little things, the texts, the calls, the moments where you felt like you belonged. And suddenly, you realize just how empty it feels without that person in your life. I spent so many nights lying awake, wondering if I had made the right choice. Wondering if being alone was better than being with someone who made me feel like I wasn't enough. But slowly, I started to find peace in that silence. I started to realize that the loneliness wasn't something to fear. It was just a space for me to heal, a space for me to grow. Then something changed. I started looking at my life differently. I began to see the possibilities. I saw the future I had always dreamed of, the one I put on hold for so long. The career I had sacrificed, the passions I had buried. All of that was still within reach. All I had to do was start moving toward it. I remember sitting in a cafe one afternoon, my journal in front of me, and realizing how much I had been holding back. How much I had allowed fear and doubt to control my decisions. But in that moment, I made a promise to myself. A promise that no matter what happened, I would never let anyone take my dreams away from me again. I began to rediscover the things I used to love. The things that made me feel alive. It wasn't easy though. There were times when I felt like I wasn't good enough to pursue those passions. There were days when I questioned whether I even had the strength to start over. But then I remembered something. The strength wasn't in not having doubts. It was in pushing through them. It was in taking that first step, no matter how scared I was. And once I did, once I allowed myself to chase what I wanted, things started to fall into place. Slowly, but surely. And then, one day, it happened. I had my first real victory. It wasn't some huge moment, some life-changing event. It was something simple, something that made me realize just how far I had come. I got an email about a job I had applied for months ago. And I got it. I remember reading that email and feeling a rush of emotion. I had worked so hard for that opportunity, and I almost didn't believe it was real. But it was. And it was all because I had stopped holding myself back. I had stopped allowing fear to control me. And that job? It was the beginning of something new. A new chapter. I looked back at everything, the tears, the pain, the heartbreak, and I realized something important. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I wasn't just getting by. I was thriving. And it was all because I had chosen myself. I had chosen my future. And that was the most powerful thing I could have ever done. Empowerment doesn't come from someone else telling you how strong you are. It comes from inside. It comes from realizing that you don't need anyone else's validation to be enough. You are enough. And the moment I truly understood that, everything changed. The biggest lesson I learned through all of this wasn't about relationships or love. It was about self-love. About understanding my worth, not based on what someone else thought of me, but based on what I thought of myself. I wasn't some girl who needed someone to make her feel important. I was someone who could create her own value. I've learned that no matter how broken you feel, no matter how lost you think you are, there is always a way to rebuild. There is always a way to move forward. And you have to trust yourself enough to do it. Now, looking back, I can honestly say I wouldn't change a thing. All the pain, the heartache, the tears, it brought me to where I am now. It made me stronger. It made me who I am today. And as much as I hated that part of my story, I can see now that it was necessary. I wouldn't be here without it. I started seeing life through a different lens. The world seemed brighter, and I felt a sense of freedom that I hadn't felt in so long. Every choice I made felt like it was mine, and for the first time in forever, I felt in control of my own story. It was as if I had woken up from a long sleep and was finally seeing everything for what it truly was. I went out more, experienced new things, and met people who valued me for who I really was, not for who I pretended to be. And with every new experience, I realized how much I had been missing. The world was so much bigger than the small space I had let Jake trap me in. And then, one day, something unexpected happened. I ran into Jake again. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something I wanted. But there he was, standing right in front of me, just like the day we met. He looked the same, but somehow, different. There was a look in his eyes that wasn't the same. It wasn't love anymore. It was regret. He asked me how I was doing, and I could tell he wanted something. He wanted forgiveness. He wanted me back. But as I looked at him, I realized something. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need anything from him anymore. I stood there, looking at him, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anything. No anger. No sadness. Just peace. Because I had finally let go. I had finally learned to live without him. I told him, calmly, I've moved on. And I'm happy now. I hope you find peace too. He looked at me for a second, almost like he didn't believe it. But I meant every word. And with that, I walked away. It wasn't just about walking away from Jake. It was about walking away from everything that held me back. It was about reclaiming my power. The power to make choices for myself. The power to love myself first. And in that moment, I realized something that I had been searching for all along. That my happiness, my future, wasn't tied to anyone else. It was mine to shape. I finally started to embrace the future. The future I had always wanted, but never thought I could have. I focused on my career, my passions, and my goals. I stopped worrying about whether I was making the right decisions or if I was on the right path. I just kept moving forward, one step at a time. I met new people, and slowly, I started building new relationships. But this time, I wasn't losing myself. I wasn't compromising who I was for anyone else. I was finding people who accepted me for me, not for who I was when I was with Jake. As I walked this new path, I realized what really mattered in life. It wasn't the approval of others. It wasn't about being in a relationship to feel validated. It was about finding peace within yourself. It was about knowing that you are enough, exactly as you are. I learned that happiness doesn't come from someone else. It comes from within. And the moment I stopped looking for validation outside of myself, I found a happiness I never thought possible. Self-acceptance wasn't easy. It's not something that happens overnight. There were days when I doubted myself, days when I wondered if I was doing the right thing. But each time that doubt crept in, I reminded myself how far I had come, how much I had fought to get to this point. And I refused to let fear stop me now. I had to find peace with everything that had happened. Not for Jake, not for anyone else, but for me. I had to accept that the past was a part of me, but it didn't define me. And with that acceptance, came freedom. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't always easy. But it was real. And that's all I ever wanted. To be real with myself. To live my life on my own terms. Looking back, I'm proud of the person I've become. I'm proud of the strength I found in myself when I didn't think I had any left. And now, every day, I wake up with the knowledge that I can handle whatever life throws my way. I didn't need Jake. I didn't need anyone. Because I've learned the most important lesson of all, you are enough, just as you are. Once I started rebuilding, I realized something that I had never known before. I had a voice. A voice that wasn't afraid to speak up. A voice that wasn't afraid to say what I needed, what I wanted, and most importantly, what I deserved. I had spent so much of my life silencing myself for others, for Jake, for everyone around me. But now, my voice was mine again. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. As I moved forward, I began forming new relationships, real ones. Ones that didn't require me to lose myself in them. Ones where I didn't have to change who I was to be accepted. They weren't perfect, and they weren't without their challenges, but I was no longer afraid to be myself. And I realized something: real love doesn't come from someone who tries to control you. It comes from someone who accepts you as you are, flaws and all. It comes from someone who lifts you up, not drags you down. I spent a lot of time thinking about forgiveness. And I realized something important: forgiveness wasn't about letting Jake off the hook. It was about freeing myself from the past. It was about not letting his actions define me anymore. Forgiving him didn't mean I had to welcome him back into my life. It just meant that I was ready to let go of the anger. To let go of the resentment. Because holding on to that kind of pain only holds you back. As time went on, I started to see how strong I truly was. Not in the way people usually talk about strength. No, it wasn't about putting on a brave face or pretending everything was okay. It was about the strength to be vulnerable. The strength to admit when I was hurt, and the strength to ask for help when I needed it. I hadn't known that kind of strength existed in me until I faced the hardest moments of my life. And now? Now I know that strength is always there, even when you think it's not. Happiness, for me, used to be about finding someone to share my life with. But now? Now I know that happiness comes from within. It's about finding peace with who you are, finding joy in the small things, and living a life that's true to you, not to anyone else's expectations. It's about waking up every morning and knowing that the choices I make are mine. That I'm not living to please anyone. I'm living for me. I started to love myself again. And not in the way I thought I should love myself. Not in some superficial way. But in a deep, real way. I learned to embrace my flaws, my mistakes, my imperfections, because they made me who I am. I spent so long trying to be someone else, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. But when I finally let go of that, when I finally embraced who I really was, I felt free. I felt complete. And then came the moment of true liberation. The final letting go. It wasn't just about Jake or the relationship, it was about everything. It was about letting go of the person I used to be, the person who thought she needed someone else to be whole. I was whole on my own. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt. Moments where I thought I couldn't do it. But every time I felt weak, I reminded myself of the strength I had found. And slowly, the weight of the past began to lift. Now, I live a life that's mine. I wake up every day knowing that I'm free to make my own choices, free to live my life however I want. And that, my friends, is the kind of freedom you can't put a price on. It's not always easy. Some days, I feel lonely. Some days, I feel like I'm not where I want to be. But every day, I remind myself that I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm moving forward, step by step, creating the life I deserve. The unknown used to terrify me. I was always afraid of what might happen, of what I couldn't control. But now, I've learned to embrace it. Because the unknown is where growth happens. It's where new opportunities arise. And more importantly, it's where freedom lives. I don't have all the answers. And honestly, I don't need them. I'm learning to trust the journey, to trust that I'll be okay no matter what comes next. And for the first time, I'm not afraid to take chances. Saying no used to feel like a betrayal. It felt wrong, like I was letting someone down. But now I know that saying no is the most powerful thing you can do for yourself. It's a boundary. It's a way of taking control of your life, and making sure your needs are met first. It doesn't make you selfish. It makes you strong. And when you learn to say no without guilt, you learn how to protect your peace. Healing isn't linear. Some days, I feel like I'm at the top of the world, and others, I feel like I've taken 10 steps back. But that's okay. Healing takes time. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I learned that the scars don't disappear, they fade. They become a part of who you are, but they don't define you. They're reminders of how strong you were to make it through. And every time I looked at them, I saw growth, not weakness. I remember a time when my dreams felt distant. Like they were just out of reach. I had put them on hold for so long, believing that I couldn't have both, love and success. But now I know better. I started chasing those dreams again, one step at a time. And as I did, I realized that the love I had always wanted, the kind of love that made me feel safe and supported, it was the love I needed to give myself first. And once I did that, everything else started falling into place. Looking back, I can see just how far I've come. I see the woman I was before, lost in someone else's world, and I see the woman I am now, standing strong in her own. It hasn't been easy, and it hasn't been fast, but it's been real. I didn't get here by avoiding my past. I got here by facing it, by learning from it. I got here by choosing to grow, even when it seemed impossible. And that's the lesson I want to leave with you. Growth doesn't come from running away. It comes from facing the hard truths and choosing to keep moving forward. This isn't the end of my story. Far from it. It's the beginning of something new. Something better. And every day, I wake up knowing that I'm the one in control. I'm the one who decides what my future looks like. And that's the most powerful thing I could ever ask for. Maybe you're still in a place where you're not sure who you are or where you're going. That's okay. You don't need to have all the answers right now. What matters is that you take that first step. What matters is that you choose yourself. And when you do, you'll see, everything else will follow. It was the kind of call no one is ever prepared for. I remember exactly where I was when I got the news. It hit me like a ton of bricks. My best friend, Sarah, was gone. Just like that. A car accident. No warning, no goodbyes. I never thought I'd feel that kind of pain. I dropped everything. I couldn't think straight. I didn't know how to process it. How could someone so full of life, someone who was always there, be taken so suddenly? I didn't know how to handle the grief. I didn't know how to breathe, without feeling like I was suffocating. That hole she left behind? It felt like it was swallowing me whole. Everything I had been working for, everything I had built, felt so small. I had been fighting to reclaim my life, to build something. For myself, and then, this. The loss of someone who knew me better than anyone else, the one person who understood my struggles and never judged me. I kept thinking, this isn't real. This can't be happening. But it was. And the weight of it was unbearable. I didn't know how to carry it. And for the first time in months, I felt lost. Like I was back to square one. Grief does something to you. It changes you. It makes you question everything you've ever known. And I found myself falling into old habits, doubting myself, questioning whether I was strong enough to handle it. It felt like I was losing control all over again. I couldn't focus. I couldn't think. I found myself sitting in my room, staring at the wall, wishing I could rewind time. Wishing I could say just one more thing to Sarah. But she was gone. And no amount of wishing could bring her back. And then there was that moment. The one where you can't keep it together anymore. I was sitting at her funeral, surrounded by family and friends, and it hit me like a wave. I broke down. I cried so hard, I couldn't breathe. The pain was so deep, it felt like it was eating me alive. I thought I would never feel okay again. I was supposed to be strong. I was supposed to be this person who could handle anything. But in that moment, I felt weak. I felt like I couldn't take another step forward. But here's the thing about grief, no one prepares you for it. And no one tells you that, eventually, the pain softens. Not because you forget, but because you learn to live with it. Sarah's death changed me. But in a way, it also woke me up. I realized that even in my darkest moments, even when I felt like I was falling apart, I was still here. I was still alive. And I had to keep going, for her, for me, for everyone who needed me to be strong. Through the grief, I began to see life differently. Suddenly, the things I had been struggling with didn't seem as important. The petty problems, the things I used to get upset about, they all seemed insignificant in the face of losing someone I loved. I started thinking about the people who were still here. The people who loved me, who supported me. And I realized that life isn't guaranteed. We don't know how much time we have, so we have to make it count. It took time, but I found my strength again. I started living in a way that honored Sarah. I started chasing the dreams she always encouraged me to follow. She had always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. And I realized that her belief in me hadn't died with her. It was still there, in everything I did. And that was the turning point. I stopped running from my grief. I accepted it. I allowed it to change me, to make me stronger, and to push me forward. Her death reminded me of one simple truth: life is fragile. And I couldn't keep waiting for tomorrow to chase my dreams. I couldn't keep living like there was all the time in the world. Because there isn't. So I started living with intention. With purpose. I used to think that the only way to find peace was to avoid pain. But now I know, peace comes from embracing both the good and the bad. It comes from accepting that life isn't always fair, but it's still worth living. Now, as I go on with my life, I carry Sarah with me. Not in the way I thought I would, not in the way that I expected, but in a way that makes me stronger. Every decision I make, every path I choose, I think about her. I think about what she would want for me. And that's the life I'm living now. I'm no longer afraid of the unknown. I'm no longer afraid to take risks. Because the biggest risk of all is not living. Not fully embracing life, not fully embracing the people who love you. Moving on isn't something you can force. It's not something that happens on a timetable, no matter how much you want it to. Some days, I felt like I was finally starting to move forward, and then there were days when the grief would hit me like a tidal wave, pulling me back to where I started. The hardest part? It wasn't about forgetting. It was about learning to live with the pain and still moving forward. There were nights when I would lie awake, still mourning Sarah, still wishing I could have one more conversation, one more laugh. And on those nights, I felt completely powerless. I started feeling guilty. Guilty that I was moving on without her. Guilty that I was starting to feel joy again when she wasn't here to experience it with me. I kept thinking, am I forgetting her? Am I betraying her memory by living my life without her? It was a heavy guilt. One that made me question every decision I made, every step I took. But slowly, I realized something important. Moving forward didn't mean leaving her behind. It meant living in a way that honored her, and doing the things she had always wanted for me. She wanted me to be happy. She wanted me to live fully. And that's exactly what I started doing. In the midst of all the heartache, something incredible happened. I started to rediscover parts of myself that I had buried for so long. The dreams I had put on hold, the goals I had abandoned, suddenly, they all felt possible again. I started pursuing things I had never dared to before. I enrolled in a course I had always been interested in. I started traveling, seeing places I'd always dreamed of. It felt like I was reclaiming my life, piece by piece. And with every new experience, I felt a little more like the person I was before everything fell apart. Then, there was the moment when I realized something extraordinary. It wasn't all perfect. I still had moments of sadness, of loss. But I was finally at peace with it. Peace with the fact that grief would always be a part of me, but it didn't have to control me. Peace with the fact that I was stronger than I ever thought I was. I had learned to carry my grief, but not let it define me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living my life again, not in spite of my pain, but because of it. After everything I had been through, I realized that my purpose wasn't just to survive. It was to thrive. To take everything I had learned from the pain, the loss, and the struggle, and use it to fuel something greater than myself. I started giving back. I began volunteering for causes that were important to me. And the more I gave, the more I received in return. Helping others didn't just make me feel good. It reminded me of how much strength I had gained through my struggles. It reminded me of how far I had come, and how much I still had to offer the world. I had closed the door on one chapter of my life, but in doing so, I opened up a new one. A chapter where I had control. A chapter where I was in charge of my own happiness. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. Everything had changed. And while the past would always be a part of me, it no longer had a hold on me. I was free. And that freedom? It was the greatest gift I could ever give myself. As I moved forward, I noticed something else. The people who had stuck by me during the hardest times? They became even more important. They weren't just friends. They were family. They were the ones who loved me when I didn't feel lovable. The ones who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I had learned that real relationships, true connections, aren't the ones that are always easy. They're the ones that withstand the storms. And I held those people close, appreciating them in ways I never had before. Looking forward, I wasn't focused on what I had lost. I was focused on what I had gained. I had gained strength, clarity, and the wisdom to understand what truly mattered. I didn't need someone to complete me. I was complete on my own. And the future? It was mine to create. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time in years, I felt truly excited about what was to come. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I could face them. I was ready. Just when I thought I had moved on, when I thought I was finally in control of my life, the past came rushing back. I got a message one night, out of the blue. It was from Jake. At first, I didn't want to open it. I thought about blocking him, about pretending he never existed. But something in me, something I couldn't explain, made me open it. And as soon as I did, I saw the words that would haunt me for weeks. I'm sorry, Mary. I need to tell you something important. Reading those words felt like a punch to the gut. I didn't know what he wanted. I didn't know what he could possibly say that would matter now. But I couldn't stop myself. I read on. He told me he had been seeing someone else. That the reason he had tried to control me, the reason he had pushed me away, was because of his own insecurities. But then came the twist. He said he was dying. I don't have long, he wrote. I've been diagnosed with cancer, and the doctors say there's nothing they can do. Just like that, everything I had worked so hard to forget came crashing back. I sat there, staring at the screen, completely numb. My mind couldn't process it. How could he be telling me this now? After everything? After the pain, the manipulation, the lies, why was he coming to me with this now? I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to hate him. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy, but that felt wrong. After everything, I didn't know him anything. But at the same time, a small part of me couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he deserved some kind of peace before it was all over. And then came the guilt. Should I go see him? Should I reach out? Should I forgive him? Or was that just giving him the power to hurt me again? After days of going back and forth, I finally decided to meet him. Not because I owed him anything, but because I needed to understand. I needed to know if the person I thought he was really the person he had become. So I agreed to meet. As I walked into the hospital room, I saw him lying there, thinner. Then I remembered, his face pale. He looked fragile, almost like a shadow of the person he used to be. And for a moment, I was taken aback. I didn't know how to feel. He looked up and saw me. His eyes were filled with something I hadn't expected, regret. Real, deep regret. He apologized, again and again, for everything he had done to me. For the control, the manipulation, the lies. But then he said something that hit me harder than anything else. I was afraid to love you, Mary. I thought if I didn't control you, you'd leave me. And I couldn't handle the thought of losing you. His words hit me like a wave. For a moment, I felt sorry for him. I saw the broken man lying in front of me, and for a split second, I almost forgot everything that had happened. I almost reached out to him. But then I remembered. I remembered how I had felt when he made me doubt myself. I remembered the nights I spent crying, wondering if I would ever be enough. And suddenly, that sympathy I had started to feel disappeared. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I realized something. He wasn't the person I had built him up to be. He wasn't the person I had fallen in love with. He was just a man, flawed and broken, like everyone else. And I wasn't going to let his illness or his regrets drag me back into that toxic cycle. I told him I was sorry for what he was going through, but that I couldn't be the person to fix it. Not anymore. I couldn't be the person he wanted me to be. I had to be the person I was meant to be. Leaving that hospital room was the hardest thing I've ever done. It wasn't because I still loved him. It was because I realized that part of my life was truly over. I wasn't holding on to the past anymore. I was finally free from him, free from the guilt, free from the manipulation. I walked out of that room and felt something I hadn't felt in so long, peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you did the right thing, no matter how hard it was. After everything I had been through, I was finally on a new path. It wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about living. Living for me. Living for the person I had become. And knowing that I could face whatever came next with strength and confidence. Jake's story was no longer mine. His mistakes, his pain, they weren't my burden to carry. And with that weight finally off my shoulders, I felt like I could breathe again. Jake's passing hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't because of who he was or what he did to me, but because of the finality of it. The fact that I would never see him again, never have the chance to make peace in the way I thought we might. But even then, I understood something vital. I had spent so much time trying to fix things that I had ignored the most important thing, myself. I had let his absence dictate my emotions, even after all that had happened. And now? Now I had to let go, not just of Jake, but of everything that had ever held me back. I felt a strange shift after his death. The anger, the resentment, the confusion, it started to fade. Maybe it was the closure I needed, or maybe it was just the reality that life moves forward, whether you're ready or not. I found myself thinking less about the person I had known, and more about the lessons I had learned. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. It was about taking my power back and living my life without the shadow of the past looming over me. I began to rediscover the parts of me I had long forgotten. The dreams I put aside for years? They were mine again. The ambitions I buried under self-doubt? They were resurfacing, stronger than ever. I felt a fire inside me that I hadn't felt in so long. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about thriving. It was about finally living the life I had always wanted, not the one I had been told I should want. And then, one day, it hit me. The peace I had been searching for wasn't something that was given to me, it was something I had created. I had fought for it. I had earned it. And as much as I had suffered, as much as I had lost, I realized that I was stronger. Because of it. I had become the person I was always meant to be, someone who knew her worth, who could stand on her own, who didn't need anyone to validate her existence. I wasn't afraid of being alone anymore. I was finally okay with being with myself. Over time, I also came to appreciate the people who had been there for me through all of it, my family, my true friends. The ones who never asked me to change, who saw the real me, even when I couldn't see it myself. And through them, I realized that love, true love, isn't about what you give to someone else. It's about accepting who you are and allowing others to do the same. That moment of clarity, of peace, it didn't come from some grand gesture or dramatic change. It came from the small, everyday moments where I chose myself. It came from saying no when I needed to, from setting boundaries, from remembering that I was enough just as I was. I had stepped out of the darkness and into the light, and it felt real this time. It wasn't just about moving on. It was about embracing the future with open arms, no longer afraid of what might come. Because, now, I knew I could handle it. The last few months had been a whirlwind, but in a way, they had been the most defining of my life. I had walked through fire and emerged stronger, wiser, and more whole than ever before. As I stood on the edge of the life I had rebuilt, I felt a quiet strength, a sense of purpose I hadn't known I was capable of. I was ready to take on whatever came next, knowing that I could face anything. And so, here I am, at the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Life is never perfect. It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes, downright painful. But it's also beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see where it takes me. I'm not defined by my past. I'm not defined by the people who hurt me. I'm defined by the strength I found within myself to keep going. And that's something no one can take away from me. If you've been through your own struggles, if you felt like you've lost your way, remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power. Take that first step toward healing, toward living your life on your own terms. You deserve it. You are stronger than you know. Don't wait for the perfect moment, make today the day you start. Your journey is just beginning, don't forget if I did any wrong. I told him I was sorry for what he was going through, but that I couldn't be the person to fix it. Not anymore. I couldn't be the person he wanted me to be. I had to be the person I was meant to be. Leaving that hospital room was the hardest thing I've ever done. It wasn't because I still loved him. It was because I realized that part of my life was truly over. I wasn't holding on to the past anymore. I was finally free from him, free from the guilt, free from the manipulation. I walked out of that room and felt something I hadn't felt in so long, peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you did the right thing, no matter how hard it was. After everything I had been through, I was finally on a new path. It wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about living. Living for me. Living for the person I had become. And knowing that I could face whatever came next with strength and confidence. Jake's story was no longer mine. His mistakes, his pain, they weren't my burden to carry. And with that weight finally off my shoulders, I felt like I could breathe again. Jake's passing hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't because of who he was or what he did to me, but because of the finality of it. The fact that I would never see him again, never have the chance to make peace in the way I thought we might. But even then, I understood something vital. I had spent so much time trying to fix things that I had ignored the most important thing, myself. I had let his absence dictate my emotions, even after all that had happened. And now? Now I had to let go, not just of Jake, but of everything that had ever held me back. I felt a strange shift after his death. The anger, the resentment, the confusion, it started to fade. Maybe it was the closure I needed, or maybe it was just the reality that life moves forward, whether you're ready or not. I found myself thinking less about the person I had known, and more about the lessons I had learned. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. It was about taking my power back and living my life without the shadow of the past looming over me. I began to rediscover the parts of me I had long forgotten. The dreams I put aside for years? They were mine again. The ambitions I buried under self-doubt? They were resurfacing, stronger than ever. I felt a fire inside me that I hadn't felt in so long. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about thriving. It was about finally living the life I had always wanted, not the one I had been told I should want. And then, one day, it hit me. The peace I had been searching for wasn't something that was given to me, it was something I had created. I had fought for it. I had earned it. And as much as I had suffered, as much as I had lost, I realized that I was stronger. Because of it. I had become the person I was always meant to be, someone who knew her worth, who could stand on her own, who didn't need anyone to validate her existence. I wasn't afraid of being alone anymore. I was finally okay with being with myself. Over time, I also came to appreciate the people who had been there for me through all of it, my family, my true friends. The ones who never asked me to change, who saw the real me, even when I couldn't see it myself. And through them, I realized that love, true love, isn't about what you give to someone else. It's about accepting who you are and allowing others to do the same. That moment of clarity, of peace, it didn't come from some grand gesture or dramatic change. It came from the small, everyday moments where I chose myself. It came from saying no when I needed to, from setting boundaries, from remembering that I was enough just as I was. I had stepped out of the darkness and into the light, and it felt real this time. It wasn't just about moving on. It was about embracing the future with open arms, no longer afraid of what might come. Because now, I knew I could handle it. The last few months had been a whirlwind, but in a way, they had been the most defining of my life. I had walked through fire and emerged stronger, wiser, and more whole than ever before. As I stood on the edge of the life I had rebuilt, I felt a quiet strength, a sense of purpose I hadn't known I was capable of. I was ready to take on whatever came next, knowing that I could face anything. And so, here I am, at the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Life is never perfect. It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes, downright painful. But it's also beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see where it takes me. I'm not defined by my past. I'm not defined by the people who hurt me. I'm defined by the strength I found within myself to keep going. And that's something no one can take away from me. If you've been through your own struggles, if you felt like you've lost your way, remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power. Take that first step toward healing, toward living your life on your own terms. You deserve it. You are stronger than you know. Don't wait for the perfect moment, make today the day you start. Your journey is just beginning, don't forget to comment if I did any wrong.